When you are going to sell your mobile home or RV park, the buyer is going to very likely ask for a due diligence or an inspection period. And in another video, which I'll link down below, I explained that your average due diligence period on a park is typically somewhere between 30 to 60 days, depending on the property. But in this video, what I'm going to walk through is your common requests that you'll get from a buyer for in terms of documents, financial statements that your average buyer is going to request to examine during that due diligence period. And don't let this list here scare you. This is just a comprehensive list of what I have seen as a mobile home and RV park broker that buyers will commonly request. Now, I've had buyers request a couple of things for due diligence. I've had buyers request a laundry list even longer than this for due diligence. So everybody's a little bit different. But I'm just going to run through this list here really quick, kind of explain each one a little bit further in detail. That way, again, if you are thinking about potentially selling your park one day, it's good to just start gathering up as much documentation as you're able to. Because again, like I mentioned in the other video, good record keeping will very often be your friend when you are going to sell. Mainly because a buyer cannot make you an adequate offer without knowing the true mechanics of your park. So let's go ahead and run through these here. First up is rent roll. Essentially details of what each tenant is paying and what their tenancy looks like. Month-to-month lease, annual, when they move out, if they're behind in collections. P&L, your profit and loss statement. So that's a statement showing all of the recurring income and expenses for your property. Keyword there is recurring, so commonly recurring income and expenses being, for example, utilities are commonly recurring, right? Versus something that may not be recurring, like an eviction that you had to pay for. T12, your trailing 12 statement. So your trailing 12 will actually show in arrears the last 12 months of your property and what it's brought in and what's gone out. So a little bit dissimilar to your profit and loss statement, which is recurring income and expenses. Your T12 will show any and all income and expenses. So again, something that might not be recurring would be like an eviction. Like if you had one eviction in July of last year, it'll show that, but it won't really go on your profit and loss statement because it's not recurring. Business tax returns. If you hold your property in an entity or an LLC, there'll be the tax returns for that specific entity. Bank statements. Bank statements for that specific entity. Because rent rolls, profit and loss statements, those are all good, but to actually verify the income and expenses, most buyers are going to want to see some kind of ledger, bank statement, something of that nature to show the income and outgo of the property. And keep in mind, sometimes buyers do want to see multiple years of income and expenses, things like that. And it should be noted that you do not have to consent to all of that unless it's specifically in the contract. For example, a buyer might ask for 3 years of bank statements and you might say, well, I'll let you see 1. And the buyer can agree or disagree to that. Permits, licenses, and letters. So obviously in the mobile home and RV park space, most of the time you have to have some kind of operating permit or license, or at least some kind of official letter from the city saying that you can operate the park. Boundary survey. Exactly how it sounds. So a survey of the parcel that the property, that the mobile home park or RV park is sitting on. That'll show boundary lines, improvements, all sorts of things like that. And again, just to reiterate here, you don't necessarily have to have all of these things. These are things that a buyer will often request, and you can agree or disagree to show them, or you can say, I don't have X, Y, and Z, and a buyer will agree or disagree to proceed with purchasing the property with or without that documentation. Recent home sales. If you've recently sold any homes to any residents, a buyer will usually inquire what type of home you sold and what you sold it for. RTO contracts. If you have any rent-to-own, lease-to-own contracts in your park, oftentimes a buyer will want to see that. Utility bills. If you pay for any of the utilities in the park, whether that be water, sewer, trash, gas, a buyer will often want to see those utility bills. They may want to see up to 12 to 24 months of those bills to see if there's been any irregularities. Stop loss report. This is related to insurance, so if you had any claims, your reimbursement, a buyer will want to see that. Tax bills. Buyer will want to see what you've historically had to pay in property tax. Insurance policy. A copy of the policy that you actually carry for the park. Collections report. Essentially a report showing who's not caught up and who's current on your tenants and what they're paying you. Essentially a report showing which residents are all caught up and don't have a balance and which ones are delinquent on any rent payments. Utility composition. It's as simple as just telling the buyer what your utility lines are made out of. Typically plumbing, underground, whether you got cast iron, clay, PVC, etc. Compensation for employees. If you've got anybody in the park that you're paying, they don't have to be full-time. Could be a manager, could be a maintenance man, whatever you're paying them. Buyer wants to see a schedule of that. Tenant leases and estoppels. A buyer is going to want to see every single lease in your park. If you don't have any leases, then a lot of times they'll ask for estoppels, which are essentially your tenants signing something that says, I'm paying this per month and this is what my tenancy looks like. Rules and park prospectus. So most parks have a set of rules that each resident has to follow. They're going to want to see that prospectus or that outline set of rules that oftentimes every resident has signed on to in addition to their lease. Bill back reports. This only applies if you're billing back utilities. For example, if you have a master water meter at the park and you're charging each one of your tenants, a buyer will want to see some kind of report as to how you're billing them back or what system you're using to determine what they owe you. Park map, essentially exactly what it sounds like, a map of the park and showing each lot number or address. Environmental reports or a phase 1. So if you've ever had an environmental report done at the park, commonly referred to as a phase 1 or phase 2, if you had to go get one of those, a buyer is, again, probably going to order one of their own, but they'd like to see yours too, or they often request it. Park-owned home titles. So if you own any of the homes in the park, a buyer is going to want those titles, assuming they convey with the sale at closing. Now, most of the deals I've worked on, there's always one or two of those missing. So sometimes a bill of sale will suffice. A little different for every state. Engineering and as-builts. I find that a lot of sellers don't always have these, but this is essentially if you have construction drawings showing improvements or how the original infrastructure of the park was built. If you happen to have those, a buyer will request it. City inspection reports. If the city has come out and done any inspections on the park or cited any violations, buyer will want to see that. Aged receivables. A report showing any aged invoices that are owed. Vendor contracts. If you have any contracts with certain vendors, for example, say you're locked into a 1-year contract with your lawn maintenance company, a buyer will want to see that. Schedule of park-owned homes. Again, if you have park-owned homes in the park, they'll want to see a schedule of year, make, model, and oftentimes general condition of the park-owned home. List of personal property. If you have any personal property that you do not want to convey with the sale, it's important you put that in the contract. Schedule and invoice of capital improvements. Essentially, if you've done any big capital improvements at the park, it's important to lineate those and call out what you've spent on them. And if anything, it typically helps your value. So for example, if you replaced all the plumbing lines and it cost you $100,000, be sure to have a schedule of that ready. Insurance information on park-owned homes. Again, if you own park-owned homes, they'll want to see, and you have insurance on them, because not every owner keeps insurance on their park-owned homes, a buyer will want to see what type of insurance policy you carry on those homes. Previous inspections of infrastructure. So if you have had any inspections on any of the infrastructure in your park, again, primarily utilities, a buyer will want to see that. List of contractors. Buyers will often request a list of any contractors that have worked on the park in the past. By and large, the reason for that is they want to make sure whoever has done work on the park is a credible and or licensed and insured tradesman. Schedule of evictions. If you have had several evictions recently, a buyer will want to know about that. Tax information on park-owned homes. Again, information if you own any park-owned homes, just on what kind of taxes you pay for. So one thing I'd really like to stress here is that this list is not necessarily the exact list you're going to get every single time you go to sell a park, nor from every single buyer. All buyers are different, and another thing that it's important to remember is that whatever is agreed upon for the due diligence or inspection list is what is going to be supplied. So a buyer is very often always going to ask for as much as possible. However, I would say that these items here are all in some way relatively standard items for a buyer to request. And one other thing to note is that after you supply all of this information, a buyer will very frequently have significant follow-up questions to all of these things. Again, this isn't to scare you or make you think that going through the due diligence process is a total nightmare or anything like that. It's just to put you in the frame of mind that when you do go to sell a park, your average buyer today who's going to be able to close, who's going to be able to offer you a fair price for your park, is not going to purchase the park simply based on a handshake and taking your word for everything. They're going to request documents, and they're going to want a due diligence period to verify everything. And don't worry about remembering all of this. I'm going to put a link down in the description, again, of that other video that I was referring to, as well as some downloads here for you, just so you can have it handy. And again, if you are thinking about selling a park, I'm going to put my link down in the description as well. It will take you to my website. I'll give you a free evaluation of your park. I'll include a list of all of this stuff here, some other little freebies in there. And that's it. I hope you found that helpful. This is Chris Duffy with Pioneer Property Partners. I specialize in manufactured housing, and appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.